In this video of the Queens Gambit series, we're going to take a look at the most topical line recently in the Queens Gambit with the early Bishop F4 line. It's been seen in the World Championship match, I believe in the two matches and not only one game, and it was in this line in the Bishop F4 Queens Gambit Declined. And the idea is we should be very aware of. So let's go ahead and look at it from Black's perspective. And we're going to see a different move order from the previous games. Typically we see knight f6 here, which could allow the exchange variation. So after knight f6, and I will cover the exchange variation in detail in the following video. But in this game, Black decides to play bishop e7 here. Now, you're like, well, does this avoid the exchange variation? Well, yes, we get a completely different style of game. After c takes d5, c takes d5, since the bishop cannot go to g5 to pin the knight, that only leaves the f4 square for the bishop, so we have a different type of game. And one of the major differences here is Black's bishop can develop to f5. But we typically get very, very interesting play after g4 and h4. And you may like this line better than the exchange variation lines that we're going to be looking at, so keep this in mind. And if you're interested in playing this from the 2016 US Championship, Alex Lenderman played against Fabiano Caruana, and Caruana runs a clinic in how to play this position for Black if you're trying to win. So definitely take a look at that game as the starting point for playing this position. Okay, so back to the main game. After bishop e7, you will see a quick and easy transposition. The only difference from the previous line that we looked at, of course, is the bishop is on f4 and not on g5, making it a different main line. After knight bd7, notice how all of Black's moves are the same, and the ideas will be very similar. There are three major variations that you should be aware of. There's lots of moves for White, but generally these three variations will take care of the major ideas. So let's first start off with the most aggressive looking of the three, queen c2. And you're like, well, I mean, this seems like a normal move to me. What's aggressive about it? Well, White's going to castle queenside in this variation. It's the only variation that we see happens. So if your opponent was to tell you in advance, I'm going to castle queenside, where do you think you should be attacking? Because he's not going to wait around on the king side. He's going to come after you. Well, we need to be attacking on the queen side, so we play the typical move c5, and later we're hoping to be able to use these open files to attack his king. So he takes, we get a piece closer, he castles anyway. Now, here we have a distinct problem with our bishop. And generally we want to play b6 and bishop b7 in order to worry about the center and make things happen. But in this situation, we want the open file as fast as possible to attack the king. So he plays bishop d7 here. Well, we get our rook to the open file. White's attack hasn't even started on the king side, and we've completed our development, and we're trying to quickly go after White's king here. Bishop c6. Everybody's lining up. We can quickly see how he's gotten the bishop pair, gives it back, but then taking stock, whose bishop is better and why? These are the types of imbalances that you need to notice when you're playing these solid positions like the Queen's Gambit, because I would say weak chess players would look at this position and go, yep, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yep, seven pawns, we both have a queen, but we've got two rooks, and we both have a dark square bishop. Yeah, this is definitely a draw. I'll agree to a draw here. Absolutely not. This is very, very far from the truth. Black has some slow and steady pressure here, because notice how the pawns, the important pawns in the center, are agreeing with a dark square bishop, whereas this bishop is hemmed in by his pawns, which means our bishop can attack these pawns as targets long term, whereas his bishop can only defend. And we know from understanding piece imbalances that a defensive piece is a bad piece. So I'm going to run through a couple more moves of the game here to see how gradually black plays to take more advantage here. We're not in the trading business. He gives away a pawn in order to get some serious play with the rook and bishop attacking many weaknesses. Makes a left securing a pawn on the light squares. Now after king h7, he's slowed down the progress on the queen side because he is trying to create a pass pawn on the king side where he has his majority. And there's not much white can do to stop the unopposed pawn. Once he makes the queen, he resigns because he realizes that all he has left is a spite check, and then the game is over because white is going to get checkmated very quickly there. So the first takeaway is with that queen c2 castle queenside line, just attack the king quickly and you'll be fine. Don't give him a chance to completely develop. You need to attack him first. So after knight bd7, we have c5. This was the line that Anand played against Carlsen, and the thing that you need to look at most in this position is which piece are we not using? Which minor piece is not working for us? Absolutely. Much like in the French defense, this is our baby and we have to take care of him. So we need to play against this pawn chain. So the first thing you do is play c6. And after bishop d3, b6, trying to hit the pawn chain. After b4, we continue to try to undermine with a5. Now I believe in the Carlsen game, or Anand Carlsen game rather, the move b5 was played with interesting play, with the idea that if he took here, you play c6 first. So you should definitely take a look at that game and the tons of analysis performed by top GMs in that position. You can find videos of it on YouTube, as well as if you look up the World Championship articles on ChessBase, you will find fully annotated games by strong grandmasters of how to play this position. After a3, the main idea comes into effect. This is our bad bishop. This is his good bishop. Please, sir, would you like to trade bishops? Yes. Yes, I would. After castles, we get our queen in excellent position. We create the imbalance over here. If we have a dark square bishop left, we want to secure the pawns on light squares. Little by little, our position's getting better. We trade a set of rooks off, and this is not a game where we are worse with black. So this is a position that can be played for the win long term with black, and I feel very comfortable saying that. Okay, now on to our main line. I'd say like rook c1 and this move a3 could be handled the same. You're going to take on c4 and then play c5. Now, in class, I've told my students over and over and over, maintain a pawn in the center. Well, let me add an extension to that from this position. Because in this position, you have to give away a pawn in the center to create an attack on a pawn in the center, which is more effective. Because if you play the move c5 immediately, you're going to end up getting a situation to where you could have an isolated pawn. Let's say if I took this way first. And in this position, a lot of people don't like playing with the isolated pawn. That's why we take here first. Now, white does not have the ability to take back on d5 for us. And then when we play c5, he's only left with options that if I take, he can either take with the pawn and he gets the isolated pawn, or he takes with the knight, in which case the knight may not want to be going there. So he decides to take. And now, at this point, the question is, how again do we develop our bishop? What is the most effective way? Is it b6? Or is it a6 to play b5 and gain tempo and time? Absolutely, the second one. After a6, rook d1. Only move for the queen, e8. And after b4, bring the knight back. We're not too worried because we have b5. And we've completed our development. If he was to play this move bishop b1, threatening mate, we don't overly worry about these situations because we'd be able to gain a tempo, and then from this position, after rook c3, I really like this idea, this pawn sacrifice idea, queen takes. We have queen a8. Now if he runs his queen away, we're going to get the g2 pawn. If he doesn't run away, we get serious counterplay on the queen side, and all of our pieces are aggressively placed. So again, we sacrificed a pawn in order to get play. And this endgame, it does have the bishop pair, but remember when bishops are strong, when pawns are on both sides of the board. So the plan with black here would be, if you can trade off your dark square bishop for his, the pawns are all on the same side of the board. That being the case, the bishop's range wouldn't be as valuable as the knight's short-term abilities. So you would then make the plan of securing all of your pawns on dark squares after the trade of dark square bishops and try to play for a win here. Which the position objectively is drawn, but I'm just saying that in chess, how do we win from the initial position? We have to fight from an equal game in order to trick our opponent in some way. So why should we ever quit playing? Don't agree to draws. Always fight on. Okay, so after knight d6, we see getting rid of the knight, and we have a distinct problem here. But we're not worried, because we're getting a serious amount of play. There's one pawn, attacking the rook, queen c8. Now, we have very good play here after queen takes f8, knight e2, knight e5. Now we're already looking at different possibilities around the king. Bishop e4. Trades queens, and we get a second pawn for the exchange. Organizes the pieces. And after knight g3, I end the line with rook d2 because I feel that black has very easy play here and has more than adequate compensation. Long term, you have the unopposed pawn on the h-file that you can use, and in the meantime, white has targets you can attack. The only real weakness that you have is here, so hopefully you're able to liquidate these pawns, so you're just left with a favorable kingside advantage. So this concludes our video on the bishop f4 variation of the Queen's Gambit.